everyone. Welcome to our session today, which is on an extremely intriguing topic, demystifying process mining. To begin with, I would like to start with a brief introduction of myself. I'm Prerna Buckshee, Senior Analyst, and I'm a part of the GCC Digital Transformation and Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Charters at Nasscom Insights. And I'll be your host for the day. And we're extremely excited to announce our esteemed speaker for today's session, Professor Will van der Aalst, who is a distinguished Humboldt professor at RWTH Aachen University and Fraunhofer Institute for Angewandte Informations Technik, FIT. It is an absolute privilege and honor to have you with us here today, Professor Will. Thank you for coming here.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great. So we will start with a brief introduction of Professor Will, who has multiple accreditations to his name, and he's not only a professor, but a doctorate holder as well as an engineering professional. Professor Will is the chief scientist of Celonis, and he's a full professor at RWTH Aachen University, leading the Process and Data Science PADS group. He's also part-time affiliated with the FIT, where he leads FIT's process mining group and the Technische Universität Eindhoven. Professor Will has actually coined the field of process mining, and his research interests include process mining, Petri-nets, business process management, workflow management, process modeling, and process analysis. So wonderful to have you here, Professor Will.
Joy to be here.
Great. So before we basically start with the questions, I just wanted to, give a brief context to our conversation today, and which is essentially going to be around, demystifying process mining. So before we jump into the questions, I wanted to just give our audience a brief context of what process mining is. And please, feel free to add on and correct me if you feel wherever you feel the need, Professor Will. So process mining is essentially a widely used technology that enables organizations to model, analyze, and optimize business processes. It comprises of a family of techniques pertaining to the fields of data science and process management that support the analysis of operational processes on the basis of event logs. So it's essentially like a report card or an X-ray of how your company's processes are actually run and not how you think they are run. So by combining data mining and process analytics, organizations can actually mine log data from the information systems to reorganize the performance of their processes, revealing roadblocks and potential areas of improvement. Additionally, process mining leverages a data-driven approach to process optimization, allowing leaders to remain objective in their decision-making process around resource allocation for existing processes. So essentially, in a nutshell, process mining is an integral part of data science that is leveraged to discover, validate, and improve workflows. And now, without further ado, we will jump straight into the questions. But before that, I wanted to just request you, Professor Will, if you can also give us a brief context of what exactly is process mining.
Yes, so I think you already indicated a bit. So if you look at the steps that you do if you do process mining, if you first start by extracting event data from systems, and many organizations have information systems that have hundreds or thousands of tables with information.
Right.
Of course, you need to have that data, so then you start extracting it. So that's the first step. Then after you've done that, you can apply so-called process discovery. And then you discover how your processes are really running, and they are often very, very different from what people think they are. Often, if you take these first two steps, extract and discover, you can already see many opportunities for improvement.
Wonderful.
Then after these first two steps, you typically you have an idea of how your processes are running, and you know what you would like to improve. And then we typically apply something that we call conformance checking, right? So you know what you want to happen, and in reality, something different is happening.
Yes.
And then you're using conformance checking to see where your execution gaps are, basically.
Okay.
And then based on that, you can, of course, automatically start taking actions if you know where the inefficiencies are, et cetera, et cetera. And that is how you close the loop and continuously improve processes.
Wonderful, wonderful overview of it, and very nicely explained crisply. So now, without further ado, I'll jump into the questions. So Professor Will, you are credited with inventing process mining. So we wanted to understand what inspired this spark in you, and were there any particular events that essentially drew you towards this invention? Also, if you could briefly explain to us the basic principles of process mining.
Yeah. So the reason that I started working on it before, I was more in, let's say, process management and workflow automation. And like at the end of the 90s, I got very disappointed by these practices because I saw that many workflow automation projects were failing, where companies were buying software to automate processes, but that often failed. And I also got frustrated by, let's say, workshops where people were talking about the processes, interviews, etc., that had very little to do with reality. So because of the failures of automation, and because if people talk about their processes, they are never completely honest, and they even people working in the processes, they often just see a small part of the things they are working on, and they are missing the end-to-end view. So that's how I got the idea to not start with modeling, not start with automation, but let's try to analyze what people are really doing. And like now that sounds completely obvious, but at the end of the 90s, this was a very different way of thinking because lots of data were not there.
Yes.
And like as a professor, I immediately also saw that from a scientific point of view, there would be many, let's say, interesting challenges. It sounds very easy, but it's actually not.
I'm sure.
So that is what led, let's say, to the first, let's say, papers on process mining. Then, like after this initial period, we quickly looked at it much broader. As I mentioned before, process mining is not just discovery; it's also about conformance checking, taking actions, but also, for example, predicting whether something is going wrong tomorrow, right? So you may have a process, and today there is not a bottleneck, but based on the data, you can see that tomorrow there will be a bottleneck. So we worked on all these different techniques, but it took quite a while before, let's say, industry was ready for this type of thinking. So Celonis was founded in 2011, right? And at that point in time, things were still, let's say, relatively primitive. Like in academic research, we had invented most of the things, but it was not really applied. And I think through companies like Celonis, these technologies, these ideas became available also to let's say large communities of end users.
Right. Great. No, great insights there. And I think very nicely put, and a very important life lesson. I think, like you said, failure sort of sparked the success, failure of automation sort of sparked the success for you in terms of process mining. So very nicely compiled. Okay, second question I wanted to ask you was what are the major distinctions between process mining and data mining, and in what scenarios might one prefer one methodology over the other?
Yes, I think one of the challenges that we currently see is that when people talk about data mining or machine learning or today ChatGPT, large language models, etc. So the whole area is a bit very blurred, right? So if you look at, you can think as data mining as the predecessor of machine learning in general. And if you take a very broad definition of machine learning, you could say machine learning is basically you automatically learn based on data without programming anything. If you look at the very broad definition. And if you define it in that way, then you could argue process mining is a kind of machine learning. But now you look at the reality, and you can think of, let's say, the machine learning field as a forest, where ChatGPT is one tree, process mining is another tree, etc., etc. There are many trees that are very different. And the point is, if you look at the actual process mining algorithms, they have been implemented in process mining tools like, for example, Celonis, they're completely different than what you would find in traditional data mining tools, or what you would find in, let's say, modern machine learning applications, etc. It is very different. And the main distinction is as follows, that using process mining, you look at event data and you look at processes. And many of the data mining / machine learning approaches, they look at one particular task. And so for example, you want to have a program that you feed with pictures. And it should recognize whether on the picture there is a dog. That's a simple training where neural networks, etc., work well. If you look at processes, it is not that you can feed it with dog and cat pictures and then get some machine that learns that. But the point with process mining, you're dealing with processes, which makes it different. You're looking not at a single task, you're looking at end-to-end processes. Above all, what is very important in process mining is that people that are managing these processes can actually understand the models. Like, for example, and now these days everybody talks about ChatGPT, and you type something in, and there comes an answer, but you cannot look at the model that is there behind it. And if you want to manage processes, it's very important that people have insights what is really happening there.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Great points there. And mining fit into the broader landscape of business process management, or BPM, as we say. And how do these methodologies actually complement each other?
So if you look at the BPM field, I think it's now, because of process mining, transforming completely. The classical BPM field was very much, let's say, people making PowerPoints, making process models, having all kinds of subjective discussions. And now see, with the availability of data, if you look at how much data organizations have about what is actually happening, it is completely unacceptable to talk about processes without analyzing the data. So I think that the BPM field as we know it, I think, is kind of disappearing. So many of the tasks, both at the beginning of the process, if you're looking for improvements, will be based on data, but also after the process is running and you would like to control the process, that there are that you early detect problems, etc. I think much of the BPM field will become data driven, and there is no other way. So I think that the BPM field does not disappear, but the BPM field will be, let's say, more than 50% process mining. And if you
great,
it's very interesting. If you look at the scientific conferences in the field of business process management, for example, then let's say 10 years ago, you would hardly see any process mining papers. But these days, most of the BPM papers are about process mining, which shows that this development.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, great thoughts. Very valid points. And moreover, it would be great if you could elucidate a bit on how does process mining compare to business intelligence, and how can it be used to sort of make informed strategic decision making for business leaders, CXOs, at the board level. How can it help in that?
Yeah, so I think classical BI tools, they just work with tabular data and they don't look at processes at all. But of course, there are relationships, right? So, for example, if you're using a process mining tool like Celonis, you will look at event data, you will look at process models. But at the same time, these systems also have taken over some of the BI capabilities. Like, for example, there you also see bar charts and pie charts showing certain information. So I think process mining is extending BI with new capabilities that are not present in classical systems. And just what I said earlier about machine learning, tools and the implementations are completely different, right? Process mining is really something original, in the sense that a process model is something completely different than a table with data, right? It's not a spreadsheet. It talks about let's say, behavior, which is very difficult to capture.
Yeah. No, wonderful. That makes that answers my question very well. So okay, and also wanted to understand, how does process mining align with the principles and methodologies of Six Sigma, essentially?
Yeah, so one could think of process mining as an essential tool in Six Sigma, just like process mining is one of the key tools in business process management today.
Right.
So it's very logical that anybody that does Six Sigma also has process mining expertise and is using process mining tools.
Okay.
Having said that, you also should realize that there are different communities of people working in practice that have a certain background. So what you see is, for example, that people that have a classical BPM background, very much based on interviews and modeling, etc.,
Right.
will have a resistance against the more data-oriented view of process mining. You see similar, let's say, resistances in the field of Six Sigma. And so if people talk about Six Sigma, there are these life cycle models, like, for example, DMIC, like define, measure, analyze, improve, control. That's very commonly used.
Right.
And then you look at all of these phases, and you see that in each of these phases, it very nicely connects to process mining, let's say, capabilities in the beginning, but also at the end when you're still controlling. So it should be connected, but I think in organizations there are often still different camps, and I think one advice I would give to companies: try to get the BPM, the process mining, and the Six Sigma people together, working in a collaborative way. And also, like, one needs to invest in education, because it is often that people, they're not aware that these possibilities exist, and they're doing it with pen and paper, which is absurd if you look at what kind of data and what kind of tools we have today. Yes.
Agreed. Totally agreed. So yeah, needs to percolate down to the grassroots level also, I think, the sort of these. Yeah, so moving on to the next question, Professor Will, I wanted to understand from you, what are some of the examples of successful process mining initiatives that have been implemented within businesses, and what outcomes have the application of these techniques been able to achieve? And if you could elaborate with some real life examples of the same, it would be great.
Yeah. Let me try to do that, but first I would like to also say something general, right? So
yes.
Process mining is a super generic technology, right? So it can be applied in any organization of some size and to any process. So if you look at in what industries is process mining being used, it is being used, for example, in healthcare. It is being used in production companies. It's used in telecom, energy companies, transportation companies, you name it. It is all over the place, right? So that's very important to understand. It's also very important to understand, if you talk about applications, that within the same organization you can identify many different things that you can do. So, for example, you can focus on customer-facing processes. So a customer that is visiting your website, and you can look at that. You can look at financial processes. Most of the organizations, they start with processes that any organization has, like purchase to pay and order to cash. So these standard financial processes, like I could name thousands of companies that are using process mining for that purpose. These are kind of standard applications, but you also see very specific applications, for example, in production or logistics or something like that. So it is all over the place. If I just focus a bit on let's say, examples where I've been involved in recently, for example, one classical example would be, if you look at BMW and you look at the production processes, how they are using process mining to see inefficiencies in production processes. And BMW is not the only one, although they are applying processes to many different processes. I think it's fair to say that all the larger car manufacturers are already using process mining in some way. So So not just BMW, Fiat, Ferrari, Porsche. I like fast cars, so they're all using process mining. Another, let's say, recent example where I was involved in, because I was also speaking at one of their conferences,
Okay,
was
wonderful.
in Lufthansa. So Lufthansa is a customer of Celonis, and they are using process mining in these classical areas that I just explained. But they also use it to reduce the time between a plane landing at an airport, for example, Frankfurt or Munich. So they analyze the time, okay, when does a plane land and when does it take off again? And
right.
What is causing the delays? And this is very interesting, because you have to realize that if a plane gets delayed at one airport, that same plane is creating another problem at another airport.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you look at flights inside Europe, a plane that gets delayed in the morning is causing chaos everywhere.
Yeah.
So what are then the types of things that you can analyze? What many people do not realize is that if a plane lands, but also if the gate opens, the gate closes, if they start loading the baggage, start unloading the baggage,
right.
but even when the cleaning crew goes in and out,
Right.
fueling starts, these are all events. And
wow.
this process, if you try to make a process model out of it, is very difficult, right? Because lots of things are happening at the same time. And using process mining, you can identify then exactly, okay, what is now typically causing the delays?
Yes.
And you can, let's say, generate alerts the moment that you see that there is a problem, but you can also learn from really observing these problems how you can avoid it.
Right.
And these are, let's say, actual improvements that people that are sitting in the plane, they have no idea. But that, let's say, many planes make it on time because of the use of data in that way, right?
Yes, yes. No, great. And I think very nice example that you spoke about of Lufthansa, and how the little things, can actually need to be observed, and how they can make a big difference in terms of the success of the outcome that finally comes out. Great. So next question that I wanted to understand from you was, we would like to understand some of the challenges or roadblocks that organizations may encounter when they're implementing process mining, and how can they address these or take, sort of preventive measures to avoid those.
Yeah, so I can say a few things about that. So I think it is very important to start with process mining at the right ambition level, right? So I've seen many initiatives that start a bit bottom up. Somebody's interested in applying process mining to his process.
Yeah.
Well, what you see with these smaller bottom up initiatives, they typically have the problem that with process mining, you always find inefficiencies, right? Because if everything is running great, you don't have to do it. So you find inconvenient roofs, right? So if you try to do this bottom up, you typically hit borders where people don't like to see the problems anymore. Yes. So it's very important that organizations really start this at a high ambition level, where they want to apply process mining really, let's say, top down in the organization. What I've also learned is that it is not so smart to, of course, one needs to have business cases, but if processes are not running well, you need a business case to do this. So I was earlier talking about, I don't know, planes that get delayed are creating chaos all over Europe, right? You don't need to have a business case to be able to address these things. So it's very important that organizations see that this is a way of life, right? Right. You want to have good processes for your customers. Absolutely. And that's why, like, if you look at what are the organizations that are most successful, they have a center of expertise in process mining, right? It's not one individual, but they have a center of expertise. And they don't try to apply it to one process, because that would be a waste of let's say, expertise. Yes. If the expertise and the software and the capabilities in-house, you should try to apply it to many different, let's say, sub-processes. And so, sometimes to make the point, I take as the example, okay, I would like to predict the weather, right? So I could define a project, and I could say, okay, this project, I'm collecting data, and I'm going to predict what the weather will be this weekend in Aachen, right? I could have a project, then I would make a nice report, and that would be my weather forecast.
Right.
That would be an incredible waste, right? Because I spend a lot of time on collecting the data, getting the expertise, and then making one prediction. That's very stupid. So I want to make a weather prediction every day, and I don't want to have just a weather prediction for Aachen. I want to have for, I don't know, the whole of Germany or the whole world or whatever.
Right.
So it's super important to scale, because if you're not scaling, you're kind of wasting of opportunities. So the organizations that are really successful, they have thousands of people in the organization consuming process mining results every day. And it should not be something that is for an expert that is sitting in a corner. I think that's very important.
Absolutely. No, great insights, and very well explained as well. Great. So, moving on, Professor Will, we want you to understand, we spoke about ChatGPT a bit earlier, and technology currently is such an exciting space to be in with, AI and ML and generative AI, especially becoming the buzzword, and ChatGPT 3.5, 4 coming in. So would love to know from you what advancements are currently being made in process mining, and, how are these expected to shape the future of this field in particular?
So if you look at things like ChatGPT and large language models, that is of course on the minds of everyone. At the same time, one should realize that process mining is a very different technology. And of course, there are relationships. So you could use large language models, let's say, on the input side or the output side of process mining. But if you look at the core process mining capabilities, they are very different. And to stress that point, and I will talk about the relationship in a minute, but to stress the point is that, like if you look at empty containers, right?
Right.
Then still, I think during Corona, it was sometimes 75%, but now I think it's like 60% of all the containers that are being moved are empty, right? So if you see these types of things, then you wonder, okay, why are we talking about this? There are so many inefficiencies that you can deal that in a different way.
And Professor Will, we'd spoken a while ago about ChatGPT and generative AI, and how technology is such an exciting space to be in right now, with the large language models and newer versions of ChatGPT coming in. So we'll have to understand from you, what are the advancements currently being made in the process mining field, and how do you expect these to shape the future of this field?
Yeah, so if you look at like many of the exciting technologies happening in the machine learning field, they are definitely going to change, let's say, all kinds of processes. So in that sense, it will also affect process mining. However, if you look at the actual process mining software and the algorithms, the core algorithms, they are basically not influenced by this, because they are using a completely different technology. So where you will see it, where it will have effect is, I don't know, how people are interacting with the process mining solution. It will change. Also, many things that are, let's say, on the boundaries. For example, if you want to collect data, if you're able to better analyze text, natural language, you can use that as process mining, etc. But the core algorithms are let's say, very different. And, if you look inside the process mining field, what currently is the most exciting development is the move from traditional process mining to what we call object-centric process mining. So far, process mining has been focusing, let's say, on a single process where you're trying to track what we call cases. For example, if you're in the hospital, you're trying to track a patient. If you're like a company, you try to track an order, etc., etc. What what the big innovation with object-centric process mining is that you're no longer trying to track a single case, but you try to look at multiple objects at the same time. And so a typical example would be if a customer places an order, then in that order, that customer may order, I don't know, 5 different items. Some of these items may be on stock, others need to be produced. Then these items get delivered, but you don't get 5 packages or 1 package. Depending on when something is ready, we will receive multiple packages that will contain multiple items. So what you see is that I was talking about customer order, production order, items, packages. So this is what we all call objects. You can also think about machines, departments, etc., etc. So we are moving away from trying to follow one individual thing and then drawing a classical process model, but looking at all of these things in the same time. And for example, in the Celonis system, we just implemented something that is called Process Sphere, which is the first, let's say, full-fledged implementation of this idea. And this will be very important for companies, not just because they get insights they would not have had before, but also because the data extraction gets simpler. Because in traditional process mining, basically, if you want to have a process model, you need to extract data for the process model. Now it is reversed. You basically extract all the data, not knowing what you want to look at. And then after you have extracted all of this data, all of the objects, all of the events in, let's say, a coherent way, after that you can apply, let's say, all the different process mining techniques, and you can view your process from any angle. And so in the past, we often would say process mining is like taking an X-ray of your process. Now with object-centric process mining, you can think of it as taking an MRI, so that you basically collect data about your organization. And if you experience a particular problem, you can basically look at the angle dynamically where you think that the problem is and get the result for that. It's a bit abstract, but this will really make process mining even much more applicable than it is today.
Absolutely. No, great insights and wonderful thoughts there. So my final question is that in what ways, do you think that process mining can be used to enhance the effectiveness of intelligent automation technologies such as robotic process automation, RPAs, and machine learning, AI we spoke about? So how can it enhance all of that?
So there are many connections, right? So if you look at, let's say, RPA in a kind of narrow setting, then the basic idea of RPA is to replace humans sitting in front of a computer by a robot, right? So process mining is the technology to see where that makes sense, right? So you can analyze the work that's being done, and it will help you to steer your RPA efforts towards the area where it makes most sense. So that's one thing. Also very important, the moment that you have these bots running your processes, it is very important to monitor them, right? Because it may be that something is changing and they are doing incredibly stupid things. So you need process mining first to identify opportunities for automation, but also after the automation is running, you want to monitor it, whether it's still running well. And in many of these applications, we see that one needs something like hybrid intelligence, where you automate what can be automated, but where humans also need to look at things. So if you look at, let's say, machine learning, as I tried to stress earlier, is process mining algorithms are very different from mainstream machine learning algorithms, right? So you cannot use neural networks to discover process models or something like that. And also, no human will look at a neural network. You have to imagine you have millions of neurons of variables. There is no point in trying to look at it. Where if you're running processes, you need to have visualizations that you can understand, right? And take action on. So this is very different. But the interesting thing is that if you're using process model and you're creating these models, based on these models in combination with the data, you can generate machine learning problems. So just to sketch a possible scenario. So you're analyzing a process, and then using process mining, you see where your bottlenecks are. Then you say, okay, this is the bottleneck that I find very important. And based on this, you can automatically generate a machine learning problem. And you can use machine learning techniques, for example, to predict when that bottleneck is there, or to explain why it is there. And so this combination is very powerful. And if you're using a process mining tool, basically for any inefficiency that you see, you can generate machine learning problems to try to address these things. Note that this is only possible after doing the process mining, right? If you look at the system like SAP, and you have 800,000 tables, you cannot machine learning do something, right? You first need to be able to see where your problems are and to articulate the problem. And that's how these two things work very nice together. And that is the only way. Of course, the problem in industry at this point in time, because of ChatGPT, etc., people think that, okay, out of the blue sky, somebody will tell you what to do.
Yes.
It will not work like that, right? You need, as a manager or as an analyst, you need to analyze these processes and indicate what should be improved. And that requires process mining.
Right. No, great thoughts and wonderful interaction. Thank you so much, Professor Will. This was really intriguing and some really compelling insights for us, true learnings. And thank you for your time, for taking this out for us. And we're really grateful for this. Thanks much, and hope to see you soon again.
Thank you. It was a joy to talk about my favorite topic.
Great. And it was really nice understanding it from you. Thank you. Really enlightening. Thank you so much.